Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. We're diving into the world of genealogy, but with a twist.
Yeah, it's not your typical family tree deep dives. We're actually looking at how we measure the impact of this kind of research. It's like metagenealogy, I guess you could say.
Metagenealogy. I like that. Okay, so whose research are we peeking into today?
Well, we've got this fascinating blog post by Dr. Jose Talavera Falcon. He's a researcher who's been doing some pretty extensive work on the Talavera family history, going all the way back, across Europe and even into the Americas.
Wow, so this is like a serious long-term project then, not just a casual, oh, I wonder where my great came from kind of thing.
Oh, definitely not. Dr. Talavera Falcon is really diving deep here. And what's really interesting is that he's using all these different academic metrics to try to understand the influence of his research.
Okay, now you've got me curious. Academic metrics, like how do you even measure the impact of, digging up your family history?
Well, that's the fascinating part. There are all sorts of metrics out there, and Dr. Talavera Falcon mentions a whole bunch of them in his blog post. Some of them are, pretty standard stuff that you might see in any academic field, things like journal impact factor or the H index.
Okay, I've heard of the H index. That's the one that looks at how many times a researcher's work has been cited by other researchers, right?
Exactly. It's a way to measure both the quantity and the quality of a researcher's output. It's one thing to publish a lot of papers, but it's another thing entirely to publish papers that other people actually find valuable and influential.
Makes sense. So a high H index would suggest that Dr. Talavera Falcon's work is not only extensive, but also considered important by his peers in the genealogy world.
Precisely. It's kind of like a seal of approval from the academic community.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. So we've got these traditional metrics like the H index. What other kind of measuring sticks are we dealing with here?
Well, Dr. Talavera Falcon also talks about some less conventional metrics, things like the citation propensity index.
Citation, what now? That's a mouthful.
Haha, yeah, it is a bit of a tongue twister. But it's actually a pretty interesting concept. Basically, it looks at how likely a particular piece of research is to get cited by other researchers.
Oh, so it's kind of like predicting how much buzz a research paper is going to generate.
Exactly. And think about it. If you were doing some serious research on your own family history, wouldn't you want to know if other people were going to pick up on your findings and build on them?
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Like knowing that your work was actually contributing to the bigger picture of genealogical knowledge.
Right. And that's kind of what the citation propensity index tries to get at.
Okay, that makes sense. But I do have one kind of picky question.
Sure, go ahead.
What about like self-citation? When a researcher cites their own previous work, isn't that a little well, suspicious? Like they're trying to inflate their own importance or something?
That's a valid point, and it's definitely something to watch out for. A high self-citation ratio could mean that the researcher's just building on their own work and establishing themselves as like the go-to expert on a particular topic.
Right, right. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly. But it could also mean that they're, well, maybe not engaging with as wide a range of research and perspectives as they could be.
I see. So it's like it's a bit of a red flag. Not necessarily a deal breaker, but definitely something to, keep an eye on.
Exactly. It's all about context, right?
Okay, so we've talked about the H index and the citation whatchamacallit index?
Citation propensity index.
Yes, that one. What other fascinating metrics are we going to be unpacking today?
Well, one of the most intriguing ones that Dr. Talavera Falcon mentions is the perceived impact index. And this is where things get really, really interesting.
Oh, how so?
Well, this metric tries to measure how the public perceives the importance of the research. It's about going beyond just the academic community and seeing how the research resonates with a wider audience.
So even if a research paper isn't getting cited a ton in academic journals, it could still be having a real impact on like how people think about a particular topic.
Exactly. And in the case of Dr. Talavera Falcon's work, this could mean that his research on the Talavera family is sparking conversations and generating interest among people who are just, curious about their own family history.
I like that. It's like it's saying that genealogical research can be both academically rigorous and culturally relevant.
Right. It's not just some dusty old hobby for history buffs.
Yeah, this is already giving me so much to think about. But I'm curious, what does Dr. Talavera Falcon himself say about all this? Does he actually use these metrics to draw any conclusions about his research on the Talavera family?
He does. In the blog post, he mentions that analyzing these metrics has revealed some important contrasts, he calls them, compared to similar research projects.
Ooh, important contrasts. That sounds intriguing. What kind of contrasts are we talking about here?
Well, he doesn't go into specifics in this particular blog post, so it's kind of a cliffhanger. But it definitely suggests that his work on the Talavera family might be, particularly unique or impactful in some way.
Okay, now I'm really curious to find out what those important contrasts are. It's like he giving us a sneak peek into the potential significance of his research without revealing all the details.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so compelling, right? It's not just about understanding the technicalities of academic metrics. It's about seeing how those metrics can be used to tell a story. And in this case, it's the story of the Talavera family and the impact that their history might be having on the world.
I'm hooked. So we've got these important contrasts to look forward to, but beyond that, what are some of the bigger questions that this deep dive raises? What do you think we should be thinking about as we continue to explore this topic?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important things to consider is whether these metrics are the only way to assess the impact of research, especially in fields like genealogy or history, fields that often rely on qualitative data and storytelling. Are we missing something if we only focus on the numbers?
Right. It's like, is there more to the story than what the metrics tell us?
Exactly. And that's a question we'll definitely want to keep in mind as we continue this fascinating exploration.
It's easy to get kind of lost in the weeds with all these metrics and numbers, but I think it's good to take a step back and ask ourselves, why should we even care about, the impact of genealogical research in the first place?
That's a great point. I mean, it's easy to think of genealogy as, just a hobby, something for people who are really into history, but it's actually much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's about understanding our roots, our connections to the past, and how those connections shape who we are today.
Exactly. And beyond that personal level, genealogical research can also have a huge impact on our understanding of history, culture, even science. Think about all the genetic discoveries that have been made thanks to, genealogical databases.
Oh yeah, like those studies that trace the migrations of ancient populations or uncover the genetic origins of certain diseases. That's pretty amazing stuff.
It is, and it really highlights how genealogical research can, contribute to a wider body of knowledge and even help us solve some of the world's biggest problems.
So it's not just about, building family trees. It's about contributing to a larger understanding of who we are as humans.
Exactly, and that's where these metrics come in, right? By understanding the impact of genealogical research, we can start to appreciate its value beyond just personal interest or academic curiosity. We can see how it connects to bigger questions about identity, history, our place in the world.
And I imagine these metrics could also help us identify the most impactful research in the field, right? The work that's really pushing the boundaries and changing the way we think about genealogy.
Absolutely. The metrics can help us see which researchers are, producing work that is not only widely cited, but also generating new insights and sparking important conversations. They can help us distinguish between, solid research and, well, let's just say less rigorous approaches.
So it's like a quality control measure in a way, helping us separate the wheat from the chaff.
Exactly. And as more and more people become interested in genealogy, think about how popular those ancestry DNA kits are. It becomes even more important to have, tools that can help us assess the validity and impact of different research approaches.
Right, because not all genealogy is created equal, right? There's a difference between, tracing your family tree back a few generations and conducting rigorous academic research on your family history.
Absolutely. And that's where these metrics can be so valuable. They can help us, distinguish between amateur genealogy and professional research. And they can help us understand the potential implications of different findings.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but I'm also wondering about the limitations of these metrics. Do they tell the whole story? Are there other ways to assess the impact of genealogical research that might be more relevant or meaningful?
That's a great question, and I think it's one that deserves more attention. As we've discussed, these metrics are primarily focused on academic impact, right? Things like citations, publications, influence within the research community. But what about the impact on individuals, families, communities? How do we measure the emotional, social, or cultural impact of genealogical research.
That's a really good point. Like if someone discovers a long lost relative or uncovers a family secret that changes their whole understanding of their identity, how do you measure the impact of that? It's not something that's gonna, show up in an academic journal.
Exactly. And I think that's where we need to start thinking, beyond traditional metrics and consider other ways of assessing the value and impact of genealogical research. We might look at things like the number of people who engage with the research, the stories that emerge from it, the conversations it sparks, or the real world actions it inspires.
So it's about looking beyond the numbers and recognizing that impact can manifest in many different ways, some of which are more qualitative and difficult to measure.
Precisely. And I think that's an important takeaway from this deep dive. While metrics can be useful tools for understanding the academic impact of research, they don't always capture the full story. We need to be open to other ways of assessing value and impact, especially when it comes to fields like genealogy, where the personal and emotional stakes could be so high.
I like that. It's a reminder that numbers are just one piece of the puzzle, and sometimes the most impactful stories are the ones that can't be quantified.
Absolutely. And those stories often have the power to connect us to our past, to each other, and to a larger sense of shared humanity.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. I feel like I'm starting to see genealogical research in a whole new light, but I'm also curious, what does Dr. Talavera Falcon think about all this? Does he acknowledge the limitations of these metrics? Does he offer any alternative ways of thinking about the impact of his work?
He does. In his blog post, he emphasizes that these metrics are just one way of looking at the impact of his research. He also talks about the importance of sharing his findings with the public, through presentations, articles, even a website dedicated to the Talavera family history.
So he's not interested in publishing his findings in academic journals. He's actively trying to engage with a wider audience and make his research accessible to anyone who might be interested.
Exactly. And I think that speaks to his commitment to making his work meaningful and relevant beyond the confines of academia. He seems to understand that the true impact of genealogical research lies in its ability to connect with people on a personal level and inspire them to explore their own family histories.
That's a really inspiring perspective. It's like he's saying that genealogical research isn't just about uncovering, facts and figures. It's about telling stories that resonate with people and make them feel more connected to their past.
Precisely. And those stories can have a ripple effect, inspiring others to embark on their own, genealogical journeys and uncover the hidden histories that lie within their own families.
I love that. It's like a chain reaction of discovery and connection, all sparked by a shared pattern for family history.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so exciting. We're not just talking about, numbers and metrics. We're talking about the power of stories to connect us to each other and to a larger sense of shared history.
And I think that's a perfect segue into our next topic. So we've talked about all these academics metrics and how Dr. Talavera Falcon uses them to kind of gauge the impact of his research. But you mentioned something earlier, this personal impact index thing. I'm really curious about that. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's an idea. It's kind of been rattling around in my head as we've been talking. Like, what if we each had our own way of measuring our impact, beyond just the professional stuff or social media.
I love that. It's like creating our own metrics that really reflect what matters to us.
Exactly. So instead of, citations and publications and all that, your personal impact index could include things like meaningful conversations you've had or acts of kindness, creative projects, things like that.
It's like shifting the focus from external validation to internal fulfillment.
Right. And it lets you define success on your own terms. So maybe for you, impact means inspiring others with your art, or maybe it's about making a difference in your community, through volunteering. The point is it's up to you. You get to decide what matters most.
I'm already thinking about my own personal impact index. It's such a powerful concept to take these abstract ideas about impact and make them personal.
And it can be really motivating too. Once you start thinking about, the kind of impact you want to have, it can really guide your actions and your decisions in a positive way.
It's like having a compass pointing you towards a more meaningful life.
Exactly. It can help you prioritize the things that really matter, both to you and to the world around you.
This whole deep dive has been such a mind-bending journey. We went from academic metrics to family history research to personal impact. It's incredible how connected it all is.
It is, and I think it really speaks to the power of curiosity and asking questions. Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most interesting places.
And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. You just never know where you're going to end up.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the topics that spark your interest.
And don't forget to think about your own personal impact index. We'd love to hear what you come up with. You can share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #DeepDiveImpact.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.
And as always, happy diving.